In this module, we'll be discussing cyberbullying and cyberstalking. So first, what is cyberbullying? Cyberbullying is traditionally defined as the use of electronic communication to bully a person, typically by sending a message of an intimidating or threatening nature. Different types of cyberbullying. So even though there might be messages, a lot of times there's different ways in which these messages are sent or the intention behind them. So common types of cyberbullying. So social ostracism, where people are joining in a group and somebody is left out. Sometimes people will intentionally post pictures of group activities with the intent of showing that somebody is missing out, preying on fear of missing out or FOMO. So using that social ostracism to prey upon FOMO and to make others feel left out. So with the intent of making others realize that they might not be part of a crowd or that they're not welcome. Disparaging public comments, so posting mean things, actually taking out the actual messages that are against somebody, saying cruel things, making cruel posts or pictures. The creation of hurtful or embarrassing comments. So if somebody posts something and then there's a series of comments, now this can happen in public forums or also private forums. So if somebody has a private Instagram or Facebook and people post comments, but also if you're familiar with trolling, okay, so trolling is when people go in and they look actually to go and post hurtful comments or to troll people to engage in frustrating or challenging discussions. And so this creation of hurtful or embarrassing comments. And so there are people that will just literally troll the internet and social media looking for mean things to say, looking for ways to insult people. And so this is a form of cyberbullying. Sharing of confidential information. So this is also known as outing. So if you share a secret or you share something about yourself that you don't want to make public, and then that person goes and shares that with social media, this can often be seen as a form of cyberbullying, or if they send an email or they share this with other people. So this is seen a lot of times when we look at cyberbullying. A good majority of the research is on teenagers and youth and interaction. And as teenagers are sharing information about themselves, as they're learning who they are, they may share with somebody information that they're not really ready to have public, that then that person takes and makes that public, or they start sharing this confidential information publicly as a way of hurting them. Impersonation, creating fake accounts and pretending to be that person. Harassment, so it's just either following them around on social media or the emails, sending messages, and this is repetitive over and over and over again of sometimes taking all of these forms of cyberbullying. Name calling, or ridiculing, gossiping, or spreading of rumors. So some of this, it does mirror what would traditionally known as some of the traditional types of bullying. But when we take it into an online forum, we'll talk about why sometimes this is often more prevalent than just what you might think of as your old school bullying. That bullying has existed long before the internet. But what does this mean now that we have this cyber world that allows access for all these different types of cyberbullying? And how does bullying in itself manifest in cyber world? So then you've got voting or rating websites. So this goes back, if you remember, there's a website like Hot or Not, or even if you've seen the Facebook movie when they're talking about it was a rating website for rating different people. This can be a form of cyberbullying. Online games. So there's a lot of bullying that goes on in online games. And so if you say you've ever been in a multiplayer game and you've joined and people are playing together, there's a lot of mean conversations that happen in these different games, with people talking to each other and just saying things that they might not normally say if they were playing with the person face to face. And then the other one is happy slapping. So strictly taking videos of somebody. So if they're sleeping or if they aren't aware that their video is being taken and then posting it to the internet as a form of ridicule. So these are just different categories, different types of cyberbullying. There's overlap between them. They can come from the same person or the same relationship dynamic, but being able to recognize that these are all forms of cyberbullying, and that sometimes, especially when dealing with adolescents, they may not realize that some of these are cyberbullying. Some of the more obvious ones, like hurtful comments or impersonation, harassment, name calling, but sometimes like social ostracism may not be with the intent of actually cyberbullying. They're just posting a picture of themselves in a group of friends, and they may not realize the effect that that has on people. So being able to educate people as to how the piece of empathy works, of how to be inclusive, and the impact that and the goal that some of these social media posts can have, and who may be affected by them, and what is the motivation behind it. Is the motivation behind the social ostracism posting about a party that you know somebody wasn't invited to, or you doing it with the purpose and the intent to hurt somebody else, to make them feel excluded? So in looking at what are the common types of cyberbullying, and when you look at US teens who have experienced online or on their cell phone, so name calling and rumor spreading is often the most common type of cyberbullying, according to this Pew Research study. So what we would think of as, say, the more traditional forms of bullying that were offline bullying, name calling, false rumors, things like that, physical threats. But what's also here, and we're talking about in receiving explicit images that they didn't ask for, and also having images of them shared without their consent. So these are very often common forms of cyberbullying that you may be able to see. So, and then any type of them. So a lot of times there's some combination of them. It's not just limited to one type of cyberbullying. Somebody may do multiple forms of cyberbullying when they're targeting somebody. And what we're seeing, though, is that with the internet, that the prevalence of bullying, it is going up. That there continues to be cyberbullying victims, cyberbullying perpetrators in American youth, that number does go up. And that most of them, 5 out of 10 times, those cyberbullies are classmates. 3 out of 10 cyberbullies, kids, are strangers. That there is this ability to, if you're just playing a game and you're playing a video game that happens to be a group game, that you may end up being bullied or receiving nasty messages in your inbox, or if you're playing on a gaming console, or people start to insult you. And then this 2 out of 10 cyberbullies are adults. That there are adults who are saying things that can be construed as bullying. So we are definitely seeing these rates of cyberbullying increase. And interesting that COVID and coronavirus actually had a negative impact on social behavior online, that there was an increase in cyberbullying, and that it was getting worse. And so when we look at, okay, what are the resources? Are they, when people were trying to reach out, who will they help? Because of COVID, there was actually a decrease in there being available resources to be able to help. And so while everything was struggling, is were phones unattended, were websites unattended, how were people able to get help? Or did these resources close for COVID when everybody was in quarantine? And so it actually had quite a negative impact on social behavior online, and that in incident reports, there was an increase in cyberbullying while people were either at home or on their computers, or just getting bored while in quarantine. But the fact that without that regulation, or without maybe having some of the social in-person pieces, when everybody was restricted to more of an offline or an online interaction, with more online interaction, there may have been an increase in cyberbullying. And so that's something for cyber psychologists to look into, is what could have been the contributors to that. And one of the number one contributors to cyberbullying and cyberstalking is this online disinhibition effect. And so what happens with the online disinhibition effect is, so it's a loosening or removal of social inhibitions. So when interacting online, that would normally be present in face-to-face communication. So most people, when they're face-to-face with somebody, will not be perhaps as mean as they are either when they're with a group of people, or when there's no repercussions behind it, so that they can post something on social media without actually having to look at the other person or realize that what they're doing is hurting other people. And so going to say you're in a chat room, or you're on a message board, or somebody is trolling these message boards, they post to people, And it becomes very easy to make the person on the other side a faceless, nameless, just entity that the person is seeing, all the bully is seeing is what's happening on their side, and then the screen. And they're not following it all the way through to how is what they're doing impacting somebody, because they don't see the result on the other end to think it through. And of course, with teenagers whose brains are not developed, they're more impulsive, and now they're given this online arena that they may not be able to fully understand or regulate or understand the differences of the impact of their communication. So online disability effect takes place at all ages, across all people, and in many different ways, but especially with cyberbullying, that there is this impact. And so what contributes to this online disposition effect? So again, the ability to hide your true identity. You can insult people anonymously and they may never know. And people do this on Twitter all the time. They maybe make a fake account and then go through and do this trolling. The invisibility of the fact that you can't see or connect to the people that you're hurting. Asynchronicity, communication takes place at different times. So the cyberbully may be in a really bad mood, or maybe just something has happened, or they're reacting to something. And so then they go and don't really think about what's happening at the other end, that they're sending this email at one time. And then by the time they take a second to calm down or think it through, and the other person has received it, it's not in the moment conversation or in the moment interaction, allowing for that disinhibition effect to perpetuate itself. So then solipsistic interjection. So creating a character of the other person in the mind, right? So solipsism it's this theory that you only know really what's going on in your world, all right? So it's this extreme egocentrism that what you see is what's going on. You're dehumanizing the person. You're not thinking of them. This doesn't bother people. And so if you think back about our module on people who are involved with child pedophilia, they've created this reality for themselves that justifies their interactions and justifies the way that they are interacting with these children. And in some ways, cyberbullies may do the same, that they created a character of the person, dehumanizing them and not really thinking that they feel the way that they feel. So this doesn't hurt them. If I don't see it, it doesn't exist. And this dissociative imagination, where these online interactions become a fantasy or a social experiment. What happens if I do this? What happens if I say this to this person? And things that we would never say to somebody in person, we might say online, or you might say to somebody that you don't know, and things that as an adult would never say to a child. But on a message board or on Twitter or on social media or in a video game, when they're not seeing who the other person is, if you went and you asked somebody and said, wow, would you swear at a 14-year-old? Probably, most people would say like, oh, no, I wouldn't. But you say put them in a heated video game situations. I know I can perfectly tell you that I have seen this happen where I've been in a group setting playing a video game and heard other people that I don't know being very cruel to each other. And in a way that it's clearly they have not seen that this person, they're looking at a character or they're doing the social experiment, but they're not really playing it through to the person on the other side. And then the minimization of authority. There's no repercussions or fear of punishment. And what happens a lot of times is that if it's cyberbullying in school, the school says, well, it happened on social media. Of course, we know that Facebook and Twitter and these social media places, that they're not regulating either. And so where's the repercussions and the fear of punishment for it? So there's a minimization of authority many times online, that people can go and say whatever they want to say, do whatever they want to do. Maybe they get reported, maybe they get blocked. But to what degree is there that fear of punishment? Or does that just perpetuate the cycle to see what happens of if they are doing a social experiment? What do I have to say to get blocked? How far do I have to push it? Am I testing these limits? And so it becomes about the relationship with the internet, because they're not seeing the person on the other side. And so all of this contributes to cyberbullying, because it's a lot easier for people to be mean to somebody that they don't have to see or humanize. So how do we combat that? Empathy, humanization, establishing a reality, establishing a connection. So example, sometimes if I'm playing a video game, and I'm in a group setting, and so I started to test run a little bit, I heard some people slinging insults, and I don't usually go on chat, but I did it this time. And in starting to talk to them and say, you don't have to say that, we're all just playing. And these two people that had originally been insulting each other, after I started talking and asking questions and just kind of getting to know them, they started to talk. And by the time I ended up leaving the game, they were communicating with each other and working together. And it was because the person who's perpetuating the bullying and insulting this person and getting frustrated had dehumanized them. And so it's a bit of a test experiment of my own when I went in and tried to establish that empathy, or that at least the humanization of it, that yeah, I get you're frustrated that this happened, but there's no reason to have to go and, tell somebody that they should die. That's so unnecessary to have to do. And with that call to reality, at least in that situation, at least there was a reminder of, okay, right, I'm just getting carried away in the moment and dehumanizing somebody. So that is really the best way to be able to combat that, is to play to the humanity and to make the people realize that there is a real person behind behind that screen that you are insulting, that you might not normally say if they were just somebody in the street. That it's much easier when somebody is even driving in their car to say something, that we don't say things that are face to face to people. But that doesn't make them any less hurtful when they're heard by somebody. So then we look into what is cyber stalking. And so cyber stalking could be cyberbullying, but elevated. And often we look at cyberbullying as the way that it looks at it with bullying and the harassment of minors. When we look at adults, that's when we start to really go into more of the terminology of cyber stalking. So sometimes it is used interchangeably, cyber stalking or cyberbullying, but cyber stalking typically would have almost a more sinister implication behind it. And so in one of the readings that I sent with this module is somebody who put on and shared their story of being cyber stalked, and all of these bullying behaviors. While it was still bullying behaviors, this bully was not doing this to multiple people. They were very targeted in on this particular individual and were very focused in on hurting this individual. And so what is cyber stalking? So generally there's these 4 objectives with cyber stalking. So they identify and locate a victim. Then they watch and observe them closely, and then it emotionally harass and abuse them. And it's almost like their criminal ability to manipulate them and to install fear. And so this can come in different ways, but a lot of times with cyber stalking, it's almost catered to a specific person, where they're identifying the victim, they're observing them, and then figuring out how to get to them. And whether that can be a strategic way of manipulating them, or to get in touch with them, or to get a response from them, or to even instill fear. And so again, like with the reading and story that's shared with this module is an excellent example of somebody who was cyber stalked, and they researched them and specifically emotionally harassed and abused them to install fear within their life and take out a campaign against this one individual by learning everything they could about them, and then based on that knowledge, doing what they could do to hurt them. So common cyber stalking behaviors, so public distribution of online messaging, damage to files or equipment. So you may, it's online, they may send something like malware or something like a virus. Physical assault. So this is, again, some of the offline and online, but threats, false accusations of behavior, sending abusive messages, gathering information about the victim, ordering goods or services potentially inappropriate for the victim. So maybe they're shopping at different sites and then they have some inappropriate items sent to their website, or sorry, sent to their workplace as a way of embarrassing them. Leaving objects for the victim to find, mailing them, or sending them to web pages, or phishing behaviors, or just generally like leaving creepy objects for the victim to find. Identity theft and impersonation, creating false accounts, creating false websites and pretending to be the person. Any use of sites that promote retaliation or revenge. There are websites out there that do enhance the opportunity to do that, as well as use of information brokerage sites where you can pay for information on a background about somebody. So all common cyber stalking behaviors that when done, some of these when done especially to the extreme, can be very damaging, very terrifying, and can really be very destructive to the human psyche when somebody is a victim of a cyber stalker. And so we begin to then go into what we know as digital abuse. So again, this public distribution of anything offensive, calling you names, minimizing your feelings via text or chat, coercing you into sending or receiving sexually explicit from them when you don't want them. So they may send messages or inappropriate pictures, threatening to post private or humiliating information about you, keeping tabs on you and constantly checking in or demanding that you communicate or video conference or keep tabs. Sometimes this can stem into, even in relationships, that these forms of cyberstalking or digital abuse and cyberbullying can actually take place in relationships where the significant other is the one doing the digital abuse or doing some of the cyberstalking that can make somebody fear of ending the relationship because it's possible the cyberstalking abuse will get worse. And so, right, looking through your phone or checking through email, looking at text and outgoing calls, all of these fall under digital abuse. And so we think of cyberstalkers and cyberbullies all the time as people that may not be close to us, people we don't consider friends, people who we may not know or know remotely. But digital abuse can happen sometimes in relationships and with people that you know who are taking an unhealthy approach to a relationship. So we don't want to get caught in the box of cyberstalking or cyberbullying is something that doesn't happen. Bullying can happen, especially in teenagers, between friends, between people that they trust. Digital abuse and cyberstalking can happen in relationships when the relationship has become abusive in nature. There can also be digital abuse. So I want you to consider that some of this abuse and these manipulations can happen from people we've chosen to have relationships with as well. And so this can come also in what can be known as revenge porn. And revenge porn is a common name for it, though not always the best name for it, but it's non-consensual image sharing. And so this is when someone shows or sends or posts nudes or nearly nudes photos of someone without their consent. So in today's day and era, many people will send their significant other private photos. And when you break up or when the relationship terminates, the person will still have those photos. And what happens if they share those images? So let's say you are, in a relationship, you're sharing photos of yourself. It's consensual at the time of the relationship. Then you break up. It's an ugly breakup. And then that person shares all your photos online or shares them with other people. And this can be extremely traumatic for people because once it's on the internet, it is very hard to get off the internet. And these are things that you shared with somebody intimately, not realizing or not thinking of the long-term implications. And, which is not to say that there's anything wrong with sending these photos. You're sending them as a choice, as an adult that you're trusting and you're in a relationship with, or you're choosing to send them. But regardless, if you have not given consent, this is in line with the module on pedophilia too, is that looking at pictures and sharing pictures is damaging to others when it is non-consensual. And so this is also another way of cyberstalking and cyberbullying that sometimes gets left out when we think about it, is what happens when somebody is having these pictures that they sent to somebody that they trusted, shared online and shared with people they would not have chosen to share them with. And it's not consensual. It's not something they feel taken advantage of and exposed. And so then the term porn is inaccurate. It's used in a casual set, but really porn, when it really implies a sexual content that's contained for entertainment purposes, right? So when we talk about porn in a casual place, it's like, oh, okay, it's contained for entertainment, but this is not the case with these intimate images, right? And this is not something that we would think of as porn. It's actually sending a part of yourself, usually to somebody that maybe you're in a trusted and private relationship, and now it's been publicly released. And so really it does become cybersexual assault or cybersexual exploitation instead of revenge porn. And so why does somebody do this? And so often they want money, they want attention, they want a feeling of power, who's helpless to stop them. They may be engaged in the ability to abuse somebody. So they want to cause a lot of damage to this victim. And it can be just spurned from a breakup, or just because it's something that they want to do, they're going to take these photos. You know, I know somebody who had this happen to them, and actually wasn't their partner or their ex-partner who shared all these images. The images were on the partner's phone. Somebody was on their phone, found them, sent them, and shared them outside the consensual dynamic between these two people. So it does happen, and it is definitely a form of cyberbullying or cyberstalking. And when it happens, it can be really debilitating to a victim, that they become angry or humiliated, depressed, afraid for their safety, and their self-esteem or mental health, physical well-being. All of these things can have a negative impact on these victims. I mean, anytime anything is not consensual and it happens to somebody, there's a great deal of pain that is associated with that. And that actually that 1 in 12 people have at one point been victims of non-consensual porn. Majority of the victims are women. And that's over the lifetime of the social media. So that's a lot of people that maybe have their images or have had content of themselves shared in a way that they did not allow or provide permission for. It was non-consensual. So again, some more information about this, that people have threatened to post pictures from their ex, that people who threatened to post the photos 60% did actually present the photos. Majority of them are women. They suffered emotional distress, and that they will also, because of that, have been harassed or stalked online by others, that people see these pictures. And so when somebody is bullying or cyberstalking somebody by sharing these images, they're also now connecting them with other people and exposing them to other people who say, oh, I like that picture, I want to go into contact this person. So it's exposing them not only in their physical sense, but exposing them to people on the internet and connecting them to people. And so in getting into the legalities of this, look, what we think of, and this is just for what we call revenge porn, that the laws are far behind, that there's even some states where there is no law around it, where somebody can post a picture of you and you have no repercussions around it. In some states, it's a misdemeanor. So maybe somebody has a fine, or there's a year of probation or some sort of legal activity. In some states, it's a felony. But so again, and if you're interested in looking up the details of these different states, what happens when somebody posts something non-consensual about you? Now, we talked about if you're a minor, and then there's a lot of repercussions, but even for adults, there's a lot of damage that can be done for cyberbullying and cyberstalking, and especially when it's been somebody that you have had a trusted relationship with, and what are the legalities behind it. And is cyberstalking a crime? So yes, is cyberstalking is a crime, but all of this legislation around cyberbullying and cyberstalking is lacking at the federal level. It's right now really at the state level. And it's criminalized under harassment, anti-stalking, and slander laws. And a lot of times with cyberstalkers, it is a felony or a misdemeanor, and it depends on the severity of the actions. But when we talk in the module about cyber law, this question of where are the laws and how long does it take for these laws to catch up to the world of the internet, and what happens when somebody is a victim and is the law on their side. So what can you do if the laws are not so heavy that they're enough to make somebody not want to cyberbully or cyberstalk because there's no repercussions to it? Or how do you get it to prove that somebody is stalking you or harassing you if you're able to even find them? So you want to make sure that you're preserving documenting all of the evidence, as this will help strengthen your claim. You can create and install an email and content filtering. This will help. You can just filter out some of these messages, because this is the way that cyberstalkers or online harassers can access personal information. So you can filter, create a filtering system. Don't respond or retaliate. That can actually do more harm than good, especially if they're trying to get your attention. So not engaging with the cyberstalker or cyberbully. And then understanding what constitutes cyberstalking or cyberbullying, and then equating yourself with what defenses can help you realize, okay, and in each state, and what states have actionable items against cyberstalking or online harassment claims. And then we have tightening up your digital footprint and public online profiles Many times with social media, you can make things private. If you make them public, you can make them private, whatever anybody feels comfortable with. But if somebody finds themselves in a situation of being stalked or being bullied or having something used against them, to check into whatever their digital footprint is, where can they find a way to make themselves comfortable? If they want to move to a private profile, do you want to keep things public? And it is a personal choice. At absolutely no point, somebody who does not want to move their profile into something private have to make that choice because of a bully. If somebody wants to have a public profile, that is absolutely their choice. If they choose to go private, that is also their choice. There's no right way or wrong way to go about making a choice for your own digital footprint. However, it is one thing just to consider that when you are going in a private setting, there's less of a chance of having your information out there, but that in no way should anybody feel guilty or that they should not be able to have a public life or be able to make the choices that they want to make for themselves, especially against a cyberbully or a cyber stalker. We want to keep everybody safe, make sure that they're tracking everything, but never to shame or make the victim feel as though they've done something that somehow warrants being deserving of cyber stalking or cyberbullying. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. Other than that, until next time, thank you.